Hello, my name is Emmanuele Martinelli and I'm a researcher at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. In this brief video, my aim is to illustrate the possible application of the concepts of symbolic and connectionist structures that we found in the debate around the philosophy of AI to the organization of social orders in general and of institutional and market orders in particular, a concept that is paralleled actually by the Hayekian concepts of spontaneous and planned orders. So in the philosophy of AI, you have these distinctions between symbolic and connectionist machines. And it's really just an opposition between two paradigms or two approaches to emulate the human mind in a machine that have emerged during the first uprise of the philosophy of AI in the 50s/60s. According to the symbolic approach, AI machines are better built following a formal set of rules, and intelligence is displayed artificially in machines as these rules are followed to transform symbols that may be logic symbols and as in so-called classical AI, or symbols of other sorts. In connectionist structures, or in the connectionist approach to artificial intelligence, you have that artificial intelligence is considered as an emergent property of complex systems composed of a net of operational units that collaborate with each other, but has in which each unit has its own operational function, and it is the network of all the operational functions of the individual units making the intelligent behavior emerge in the system, in the overall system. We find, for example, the paramount model of the connectionist approach in the human brain, and where really the locus of fundamental agency is the individual neuron and the very simple patterns of stimulation and activation of the individual neuron. But the network of neurons is able to activate complex functional organizations and display overall intelligent behavior. So it is not really a question of which approach is truer than the other. It's just two styles of building machines and systems, and each of them have shown to give very valuable additions and inputs to the overall debate and the overall industrial applications even. So when we focus on social orders or collective agents, as they are called sometimes, we are really focusing on assessing how agency and how some kinds of activities of the features of some kinds of activities are displayed by complex organizations of people or individual agents more in general that interact with each other and organize in a sort of coherent organizational structure so that they can coordinate at the level of collective behavior. So, for example, in governments, in firms, in churches, or even in a group of friends having a picnic together in the park, we can observe behavior that is meaningfully collective. We can describe their actions, for example, the action of Microsoft to invest in some kind of new technological advancements, or in the action of the group of friends, like having the picnic together, as describing their actions as collective endeavors, as collective agency. So how do you describe different kinds of collective agency, or how, in other words, are governments or firms different organizationally from a group of people, a group of friends having a picnic together. These features of organizational structures are studied sometimes in relations to the features of the designs or the programming that is around AI, because it is really the same thing on a certain level of analysis. You have certain functional principles or units, and you merge them together through an overall design or organization. And the system overall displays a unitary behavior that you can either define collective, the one hand, or artificial in the other hand. So in this video, my proposal is that we can extend these two approaches, the symbolic and the connectionist, also to the analysis of the connection of the social agency. Consider this, for example, when we talk about collective agency, we can describe how the individual contributions to the collective behaviors are merged together into the collective behavior. And there may be different answers depending on different cases. So while on the one hand in AI we have different kinds of aggregations towards intelligent behavior in machines, in the symbolic structure, so it's formal programming, formal sets of rules transforming symbols that are preset in the machines. And in connectionist structures, it is just a net of individual units that are designed to behave together towards intelligent behavior. We can likewise have collective agents that act coordinating together the individual contribution through explicit, more or less explicit actually, but formal in a way, preference aggregation functions. For example, in a firm is organized in such a way that the opinions, the decisions, the desires and beliefs of different members of the firm are organized hierarchically in a way that formally it is decided how much a decision and opinion should weigh in the overall system, such as we can say that at some point the firm takes a decision as a whole. So this is a kind of, if you will, of symbolic kind of transforming individual contributions to collective behavior. While we can also imagine that we have some social groups, or better, some collective agents in general, that are not really what I have called social groups, that are symbolic, but that are simply a net of individual agents that are acting together, these agents in a ontologically independent way, if you will, but in such a coordination that they make intelligent behavior just emerge from scratch from the individual contributions without explicit ruling about their preference aggregations. And this is the case of all those kind of plural subjects when you have a lack of joint intentions or prior intentions or on collective goals. For example, a firm acts toward a collective goal. The government acts toward a collective goal that may be the common good, or the constitutional rights, or rights of the, or even the will of the monarch for all that matters. But it's like an explicit prior intention towards a collective goal. You have connectionist collective agents where, for example, in the example, when dealing with a group of friends having a picnic together, where you do not necessarily have a design pre-intention for the collective, but simply there are people bringing ham to the table, bringing bread to the table, or bringing water, or bringing beer, and then even spontaneously, and then you can have the emergence of a collective activity, which might turn like a collective activity, which might turn a random encounter of friends into the same park, into a collective picnic, you see? So these distinctions can be very interesting, for example, in political philosophy or in the philosophy of economics. For example, when you consider that social groups typically include formal political institutions such as governments, because there are procedures and there are laws and also social conventions that play into the formal aggregation of preferences among citizens, among politicians, among all the individual contributors of the collective agent. Whereas you have also other kinds of social orders that are not coordinated from the start. And the paramount example of a plural subject in my terminology is the market order. For example, Hayek does a great job describing how the market can make prices and make preferences, in a way, make collective behavior, like the change in demand, supply, and of resources and products, by the implicit coordination of the acts of millions of individuals with their own beliefs, preferences, opinions, and decisions, without them being preset to act in a determinate hierarchical way towards a common good. You see, it's just emerging from the organizational structure, which is inherently individual in the market order case. This parallels, as I have said before, the concepts of Hayek's planned orders versus spontaneous orders. According to Hayek, we can divide social orders in orders that are planned from human design from the start, so they are formally structured to follow rules and act towards a formal common good. Whereas you also have spontaneous orders when there is no prior organization or willing design among the individual participants, but simply the collective behavior emerges. And all the more complex and important, in a way, orders of our societies are plural subjects or spontaneous orders. Like language is a spontaneous order because it emerges from millions of individuals making individual choices, or the market order is one of them.